Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Audrey Stewart, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I am so excited to welcome you to tonight's event with SARAH RUHL, discussing her new book, Smile, The Story of a Face. She's joined tonight in conversation by John Lahr. Through good times and bad, Harvard Bookstore will continue to bring authors and their work to our virtual community. Our fall season is in full swing, and you don't want to miss out on our lineup. Make sure to check out our event schedule on harvard.com/events, where you can also sign up for our email newsletter and browse our shelves from home. This evening's discussion will conclude with some time for questions. If you have a question at any time during the talk, go to the Q&A button on your screen and we'll get through as many as time allows. If you would like to purchase a copy of Smile, there will be a link in the chat where you can purchase. All sales through this link support Harvard Bookstore, so thank you. There will also be a link for donation in the chat if you would like to give additional support to Harvard Bookstore. Without your continued support and patronage, this virtual series wouldn't be possible. Thank you so much for tuning in support of our authors, our incredible booksellers, and our landmark independent bookstore. We sincerely appreciate your support, especially now. And as you may have experienced in virtual gatherings this past year and a half, technical issues may arise. If they do, we'll do our best to resolve them as quickly as we can. Thank you in advance for your patience and understanding. Now, I'm so pleased to introduce tonight's speakers. SARAH RUHL is my hands down favorite playwright. Her 15 plays include Orlando, The Clean House, Eurydice, and my personal favorite, In the Next Room, or The Vibrator play. She has been a two-time Pulitzer Prize finalist, a Tony Award nominee, and the recipient of a MacArthur Genius Fellowship. Sarah's an author as well, with books including 100 Essays That I Don't Have Time to Write, which was a New York Times notable book. She is joined tonight in conversation by John Lahr. John has been a contributor to The New Yorker, where for 21 years he was the senior drama critic, in the longest tenure in that job in the magazine's history. He has twice won the George Jean Nathan Award for Drama Criticism, and his biographies of Joe Orton and Tennessee Williams have won numerous awards. His latest book about Arthur Miller will be published next year. Tonight, they're discussing Smile. With the play opening on Broadway and every reason to smile, Sarah had just survived a high-risk pregnancy when she discovered the left side of her face was completely paralyzed. She was assured that 90% of Bell's palsy patients see spontaneous improvements and experience a full recovery, like her own mother. But Sarah was in the unlucky 10%. And for a woman, wife, mother, and artist working in theater, the paralysis and the disconnect between the interior and exterior brings significant and specific challenges. So Sarah began an intense decade-long search for a cure while simultaneously grappling with the reality of her new face. I'll leave you with this quote from James Shapiro. With a poet's sharp eye for detail and a playwright's grasp of both the tragic and the absurd, SARAH RUHL has written a remarkable book. Smile is at once a gripping story and a profound exploration of the mysteries of illness. I know of nothing like it. That's a really good quote. And on that note of praise, I'll turn things over to our speakers. Sarah, John, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's an honor to have you both. The virtual stage is yours.
Thank you so much. That was such a beautiful introduction, and so honored to read for your bookstore, and so honored to be with John, and thanking John for staying up late for us since he's on UK time.
Only for you, Sarah.
Well, I thought I'd read for a little bit and then we'll chat. I'm just going to read from the beginning. 10 years ago, my smile walked off my face and wandered out in the world. This is the story of my asking it to come back. This is a story of how I learned to make my way when my body stopped obeying my heart. But the story begins with hope, the very particular hope of a birth to come. I was lying down in a dressing gown, cold gel on my belly, waiting as the lab technician looked for a heartbeat. I already had a 3-year-old girl and was expecting my second child. I was also expecting to have a play I'd written to be performed on Broadway in 5 months, and was slightly nervous about the collision of two kinds of abundance. Suddenly, the lab technician pointed to the screen and said, "Do you know what that is?" "No," I said. I flashed on the ultrasound I'd had before miscarrying my second pregnancy, when the OB had said the fetus looked not quite right and probably wouldn't last. Don't go out and get drunk though, she'd said in a tone not quite teasing, just in case it's viable. Not to worry, I'd said, wondering what gave her the impression that I'd go out and get wasted that weekend. So this time I feared the worst as I lay there while the lab technician squinted at a screen I could not see. Look, she said, pointing. There was movement, a heart beating. That's good, I thought. But what was wrong? Why was her brow furrowed? Did you use fertility treatment? She asked. No, I said. Well, she said, you have twins. Oh, I said. Do twins run in your family? No, I said, my mind racing to keep up with my body. You can go to the waiting room, she said. I'll give you a list of new providers. We can no longer be your OBGYN because you're now considered high risk. This was a great deal to absorb, that I had two babies inside me and was now so high risk that they wanted to get me out of their Soho office as soon as possible before I got preeclampsia and sued them. I got dressed. I happened to be alone for this appointment. I planned to meet my husband afterwards for lunch, where we'd celebrate if there was a heartbeat or commiserate if there was not. Now I was sorry I'd come alone. I wanted to tell my husband Tony the news immediately, but it seemed strange to reveal such big tidings over the phone. So I texted him, meet me at Gramercy Tavern instead of at Rice. Twins? He texted back. Gramercy Tavern was closed. Tony and I went to Rice as planned. We were both in shock. Tony, on top of the shock, evinced elation. Coming from a family of three, he'd always wanted three. Being from a family of two, I'd settled on two. I'd even at one point settled on one when I read in an Alice Walker essay that women writers should only have one child if they hope to remain writers. With one child, you can move, wrote Walker. With more than one, you're a sitting duck. At lunch, Tony and I talked about how my miscarried child had wandered back, not to be excluded from this birth. We talked about how we'd manage with three. I told Tony my fears, that my body could not contain this much abundance, and that I'd never write again. He said he had faith in my body and mind. At the end of the meal, I got a fortune cookie. I cracked it open. It read, deliver what is inside you, and it will save your life. So that's a little sample to get us started.
Well, my first question is about the children, and I think it was Winnicott who said a child is two people, and it's the mother's the all embracing gaze of the mother that sort of defines and reflects the child back. And I'm interested in what happens and what you experienced when your face couldn't express your feelings.
I love that you mentioned Winnicott right away. With John, it's always a deep dive, and I was obsessed with Winnicott when I first heard about him. This concept of the good enough mother, which I think every new mother should get a copy of that. In contrast to the kind of perfectionism we hear about motherhood mostly, but I do think that gaze is so important. And being married to a psychiatrist, I'd heard about this study of something called still face, where it's kind of a cruel experiment. If you've ever seen it, they have mothers engage their child, and then suddenly they tell the mother to give still face, like no expression, no emotion to the child, to see what happens. And the child freaks out. The child's happy, and then the child is like, you see the child be utterly despondent when this gaze is taken away. And so having seen those videos, I was worried that somehow I wasn't communicating that joy and that love to my kids, to my two babies, and that just as they were learning expression and mirroring facial expression, they weren't seeing my smile. And that was kind of excruciating. And I think that my husband would say, oh, no, they see that the left half of your face is smiling. They see your intention, but when the Bell's palsy was particularly acute, to me, my smile looked more like a grimace than a smile. It's funny how with purely one side, it doesn't always register as a smile. And then,
I believe you said
yeah,
you also couldn't see your teeth at one
no,
point.
no, I mean, I would never smile with teeth.
Yeah.
No, I was completely paralyzed. I couldn't blink. I couldn't eat food without drooling. It was
Yeah,
pretty
that's
severe.
what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. The wonderful thing about hindsight, is years later, I was looking for some photographs of me with the twins, and I couldn't find any because I hated to be photographed at that time. And so I was always behind the camera taking pictures. But I found videos of me with them, and it was so clear to me that all the warmth and love was in my voice, that it wasn't just the face I had as a tool to communicate that.
And what were your kids, you're in the park, you're taking your kids, you're obviously different than other parents, and the kids can see that. And what was their response to your to your condition, or did they see it as just ordinary that they
Well,
look?
they didn't see it at all.
They
Not
didn't see it.
not a
Okay.
bit. I mean, the twins always just accepted my face exactly as it was. And my older child, Anna, would have been the one to have noticed. And I remember being worried when I came home from the hospital that not only would I be taking all this attention away from her, but that my smile would be gone. And Anna couldn't have been more loving and accepting. And I think it's interesting that we think always about unconditional love as going one way, towards the child, but I felt like I had complete acceptance and unconditional love from Anna. And she had said to me just recently about the book. I had been talking about the book with my editor, and Anna overheard the conversation. And I said, "What'd you make of that?" And she said, "Oh, well, that was interesting. I always sort of thought of your face as a house, a beautiful house. And one day a wall came crumbling down, and you kept trying to rebuild it brick by brick, and you couldn't quite. But when I look at your face, all I see is my home."
Oh, great. Lovely. So this thing is a trauma that happens in a second, and it brings and anybody in the audience or in life, sometimes really bad things happen instantly, and life is never the same. So it's kind of it's an absurd moment in a way, because it's unexplainable. And I think one of the interesting things and the dramas underneath your book is you're trying to make meaning of something that is really not explainable. I mean, not even scientifically explainable, as you
That's
said.
right. Yeah.
And I'm interested in sort of what's great is it's the drama of you coming to terms and learning about this, the way your mind works, which is to not just take the wallop, but to sort of try to understand it and make something more of it. And so I'm interested in your what this taught you about, what you first of all, I want to know about your inner ingenue, as you call it. I want to know about that because the book is really a journey from the inner ingenue to some more mature or different point of view. So can you talk to that?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts right now. I mean, yeah, there's a chapter in the book called Kill the Ingenue. I think I decided at a point I was done with being an unknowing ingenue. I was going to be the expert of my own story. And I guess I was thinking of ingenue not only dramatically, but in terms of my position vis-a-vis doctors.
What do you mean by the expert of your own story?
I mean, not going to a doctor and kind of going to a doctor and assuming that I didn't know things about my own body, that they only could tell me externally about my body, but that I could tell myself and them about my body. I mean, in a funny way, I think the book is about being embodied, and for a writer, that's not always the first thing that comes to mind. I mean, you asked about things that I learned, and I do think the book is a kind of a pilgrim's progress where I finally as you said, not just took the wallop, but thought through the wallop in a new way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think I was really stuck in a little tangled loop of the wallop for a long time where I was
Yeah, I
angry.
mean, can you just expound on the tangle before we get to the solution?
Sure. The tangle was the first part of the tangle was just pretending nothing happened. Was like, okay, I have Bell's palsy, it's not getting better. Oh shit, it's still not getting better. Well, I'm gonna ignore it and write and take care of my needs. Okay, it's still not getting better. Oh shit, I better go see another doctor. That doctor told me there's nothing I can do to get better. Okay, I'll see another doctor. I'm angry. I feel angry about what happened to me. And I feel ashamed of my face. And I feel ashamed when people ask me to smile and I can't. And I don't even know that I'm ashamed. I mean, I think that's another part of the tangle. I don't register that I feel shame about my face. I just know I'm avoiding mirrors, avoiding social situations.
But you didn't read that as shame.
No, it was really stuck way down there because my rational mind said, why would I be ashamed? This isn't my fault. I care about the life of the mind. Who cares if I have facial paralysis? But in an embodied sense, every time I talked to someone, I wanted to mirror their facial expression and I couldn't. And it was hard.
Did you find in your encounters with the world that changed the nature of how people related to you? I mean, you must have been able to suss that out. Or did it change your behavior?
It changed my behavior, I know for sure. It's hard to know what other people were thinking. And of course, people are polite. But I started to hide, I think, more and more and retreated really into an observer role because I thought if I tried to make facial expressions and I couldn't, they'd be misinterpreted. So I just kind of, I think I turtled down.
And were they ever misinterpreted, or is it just your fantasy of what would happen?
Well, there's one story. I was at Passion Play in Brooklyn with my mom, and my mom had Bell's palsy too, but she was on one side of my face and she kept looking at me. And I could tell she was worried. And she finally whispered, "Are you not pleased?" Because this side of my face was giving off such opaque disapproval about the performance. I said, "No, I'm pleased. I'm pleased." I was very pleased, but in profile, even someone as dear and close to me as my own mom couldn't interpret what I was thinking.
Right.
So I felt like, well, what will strangers make of that opacity? So I think I definitely avoided strangers and was more comfortable with people who knew me well.
One of the, for me, fascinating aspects of the book is the kind of your deconstruction of the notion of smiling.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a picture of yourself at high school, I think, and what you call, is it you pronounce it the Duchenne smile?
Yes, the Duchenne.
Can you explain that? I thought, because that was news to me, but I thought it was absolutely fascinating, and the evolution of that, and how, because my mom was a Ziegfeld girl, as you know.
Oh my God,
and
amazing.
so traded on her $1 million smile forever.
Mm-hmm.
And she used to say, not that she had much to say, but smiling faces go places.
And I mean, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you do a lot, and you do a lot, and I'd like you to sort of deconstruct that a little bit for my benefit.
I mean, that's an amazing, I've never heard that phrase before, but that's show business, right? Smiling places go places.
Absolutely. I mean, what is that smile telegraph? And the Duchenne smile is emblematic of, I think, that kind of smile, the sort of Sharon Stone special.
Yeah, it's when your eyes are crinkling while you smile. So, so it's like, it shows spontaneity, and it shows that your inner life is connecting with your smile, that you're not faking it. You don't just have a big smile plastered on. It's that you're really feeling it. And so that's one reason I think they speculated that the Mona Lisa was often an opaque person of mystery and interest because she didn't quite have a Duchamp smile. Her eyes weren't quite crinkling in response to the lips.
And also it signals, according to you, and that I'd just like to hear more about this, submission in some way. How does that work?
Oh, the head tilt.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, you're supposed to, like, there's a thing where women were supposed to tilt their head to the side and smile,
Sure.
and that indicated kind of submission. So I do think there are power dynamics too involved with at least compulsory smiling, smoothing over, making things go better by showing that you're ostensibly pleased and happy, even if you might not be.
Sure. And you say you get into a really interesting discussion of the nature. I mean, a meditation on beauty, and the idea of perfection versus a sort of lack of symmetry, disfigurement, what you call lack of symmetry. And I really want to press you on that. Could you sort of talk about that, especially the idea of asymmetry? You say, I think, imperfection is a portal. Symmetry creates distance. How does symmetry, in your view, create distance?
Well, I think symmetry creates admiration as opposed to affinity, and maybe symmetry also creates desire, but I don't think it creates empathy or invites connection necessarily, whereas I think asymmetry.
Is that because it's scary, or it's somebody can be almost too beautiful to approach?
Yes, the blinding, that someone's beauty can be sort of blinding. I was interested that, like, Gustave Moreau painted Helen of Troy faceless. The idea that her beauty was so dangerous or so unknowable that he dare not even paint her face, or that it was a projection screen, couldn't too beautiful to be painted.
Yeah, but what do you mean when you talk about the symmetry having a moral dimension? Can you expound on that a little bit?
Well, I think it has to do, I don't know if I was talking about the etymology of some word or other, to do with morality and symmetry and virtue, that there's a kind of slippage even in the language between sort of beauty, symmetry, excellence, virtue. And in contrast, I feel like culturally you see all these asymmetrical villains,
Sure.
monsters, one eye, one arm, burn on one side of the face. What is that telegraphing to us? Why are we scared? Why are we being taught to fear asymmetry?
It's interesting. What immediately, from my background and the sort of perspective of theater, I mentioned in the green room. The thing about glamour, as I told you, glamour has a very odd root. Glamour is based on the word for grammar,
Mm-hmm.
in imposing an artificial elegance on language. And if you translate that to the glamour photograph, that also requires distance.
Mm-hmm.
You never get too close to glamour, because
Mm-hmm.
what glamour is trying to sell and show is, and this is where it connects deeply into the culture, is a sort of perfect individualism.
Yeah.
There are no flaws, and it's perfect equipoise. And of course, isn't that what theater is when performers are doing, they're practicing for months to pretend to be absolutely flawless in the role that they're performing in front of us, so that there is this yearning for and belief in this perfection, and people can live in a kind in this imagined equipoise, and try to. I mean, Oscar Wilde being the ultimate expression of that.
Well,
But it's really fascinating to me. As you know, I in the '60s, I was very friendly here in London with Jean Shrimpton, and when we would go, she was just a friend of the family. But when we would walk in the street, people would literally be paralyzed. It was a kind of beauty that they really, it was an awe. Now you refer to what I resonated with your words about it being moral. And I don't think, I can see the idea of moral and being good and looking good, etc. But I think it really interested me, the kind of awe that they had. And I think it comes from a sense that this person has been sensationally blessed, almost godly, because the symmetry is so unusually perfect. I don't think it's, I think it's beyond sort of rational appreciation, is what I'm saying. I think it touches on something much more primitive.
I think it is primitive. I mean, think about the Blake poem, "Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night. What dread something, something, something dare frame thy fearful symmetry?" You know, it's fearful, fearful symmetry. And
what a good point.
I love how you bring it back to the theater, and something you said earlier too that resonated about the absurd, that the absurd is when something happens suddenly and is inexplicable. So you think about Ionesco and, suddenly everyone's a rhinoceros, or Kafka, and suddenly you wake up and you're a cockroach. And I do think that's how illness can be, that it suddenly the floor opens up and you were one way and then you're another. And I think the Aristotelian idea of plot is much more, has a nicer arc, and is more explicable because there's, some kind of flaw that the character has. So of course,
it's a kind of progress in plot form, isn't it?
And which is
not the way you roll.
Yeah, well, and that's why I resisted, ironically, writing about Bell's palsy for so long. So I thought, well, what kind of a story is that? But I should have thought about my own stories where people suddenly turned into almonds, and thought, well,
sure. It's interesting because you're not your book does have a trajectory, a kind of plus minus trajectory, a kind of not really but sort of kind of trajectory, in the sense that you get sort of better.
I do.
Yeah, and it just took 10 years. That's a long story.
I got sort of better, and in fact, that is sort of the arc, is sort of a woman gets slowly better, and I think, again, you said making sense of the wallop, which I love that phrase. That's enough of a story, actually. Not a woman gets completely better, but better enough to proceed.
Yes, but I think we're inured by our media that's not enough. Somehow, it all has to be resolved. It has to be good or it has to be bad. It has to. Everything has to tie up. And I think the older you get, the more nothing ties up. It more profoundly absurd you feel, or the mystery, the world opens up with more mystery rather than things being clarified, at least for me, and I find one of the things I always admire in your plays, and it's not something that is dramatized, oddly enough, in All American Abundance is you arrive at a place of gratitude.
Mm.
And that to me is always thrilling. And because I think when you've had a really bad jolt, trauma, I think one of the positive things, if you can say positive, is that if you survive it, you understand what's been lost, and therefore you take advantage of, or you embrace what you have. And it always, not to get too personal, in my case, I lost two children at birth.
Yeah.
My two twins never made it.
Yeah.
But one lived for 2 days, and he would have been paralyzed and blind, and he died. But I never, until that terrible moment, realized how miraculous life was. And I'm always struck. Here we are in a culture which has so much. We're first world nation. We live in an extraordinary privilege. Even in difficult situations, we're with all that, we're sort of smug about existence. And when you, at the end of your book, you list the things you're grateful for. And what's great to me is that they're some they're little things. Or they're very, and I dig that in a big way. I just think that is wonderful, and it's wonderful to bring your audience and yourself, I assume, through science, through all this hard, grueling medical adventure that you've had, to a place of kind of mystery and acceptance. And you make a very interesting distinction between acceptance and resignation. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and first of all, just thanks for sharing the story about the twins you lost. I know we've talked about that before, because I came close to losing my twins when I was pregnant through a condition called cholestasis of the liver, which the book talks about too, and it was terrifying. And I think what you went through goes, soundly in the realm of that chapter on not, I can't imagine, but I can only imagine, I can only imagine what that was. And to come to a place of gratitude after something like that, I think it's hard won. And you mentioned the smugness of our culture. You can't get to certain places without a hard knock, and
Well, just the simplest things, like being able to move your hands.
Sure.
Or actually, especially as you get older, actually walking. Hey,
Yeah.
Being ambulant.
Walking is great.
Kind of amazing.
I mean, yeah, blinking. I mean, when I got my blink back, that was so great because I didn't have to fear putting on a shirt with a tag and getting scratched in the cornea, or the sun with an unblinking eye. And I had a neurologist friend, Julie Roth, who I had asked her, what do you do with patients going through a neurological episode that intimately messes with their sense of their identity and they can't fix it? And she'd said, I do have them write lists of things they're grateful for. And she said, which I thought was great, not the kind of cliche Thanksgiving table, oh, I'm grateful for friends and family, which we all should be. But she said, write down anything that if it disappeared by midnight, you would be very upset that it had disappeared, like hot running water. I mean, all these things we take for granted. And, you asked about accept. Go ahead. John's freezing up a little bit. Speaking of being frozen. Hi.
Hi.
Do you
Well,
want to take a couple
And the elusive
questions from the audience
Jerome.
while John's
Oh,
freezing? There
hi,
you
John.
are,
Are you
John.
back?
Yeah, I'm here. I think I'm.
You froze for just a little
Oh.
moment.
Well, this is England. I can't. Nothing works quite as well as it does in America. But what did the phrase that you wrote was the illusion of your face, and it leads to some sort of understanding of the illusion of the self.
Mhm.
Can you sort of unpack that a little bit?
I'm still working on this distinction. You know, I at a point in the book veer from a lapsed Catholic sort of viewpoint to a Buddhist viewpoint. And with Buddhism, you're trying to get to the place of emptiness or no self. And there's a sutra about the original face, it's called. And so the idea is, what was your face? What was your original face before your parents were born? That's how the koan goes. And then you think, well, how is that possible? How could I have a face before my parents were born? So then you start reflecting on what even is that? And does the self have any enduring capacity through time? And I think starting to view my face in that way, in terms of a more metaphysical verb, as opposed to a noun that goes through time and is unchanging, was helpful. And I think also you asked about lessons, thinking about what my face could do as opposed to what my face looked like. And I finally did physical therapy 10 years after getting Bell's palsy and recovered a lot more function in my face. And that was such a revelation, you know, that it was more.
When you say what your face can do,
Yeah.
What can you be a little more specific?
Yeah. Could it mirror joy? Could it?
You mean for a decade you couldn't mirror joy?
For a long time, I felt I couldn't.
Except you were, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you were getting joy from your writing and from seeing people take joy from your writing, which is the pleasure of theater.
Right. And thank God, you know, in theater, you have these wonderful avatars, actors who can do all that, you know, work for you. There's an interesting question in the chat, John. I don't know if it's time to look at the chat, but there's
Absolutely. You're the boss.
there's this person named Bobby who said, I am one of the unlucky 10% who did not recover. As I am an actor who works a lot, one of my favorite roles was Anna in The Clean House. This was a devastating event. However, I jumped right into rehearsals as Cassius in Julius Caesar 4 days after bells struck. A great story. An audience member said to a friend of mine at intermission, I've always loved Bee's work, but isn't it amazing what she can do with her face? I've done 7 shows since then, 3 years, and somehow people have accepted the way I look. A lopsided smile, an eye that is smaller, I have the same thing. For at least the first year, I was obsessed with how I looked and felt the need to tell people I had bells. My smile was a huge part of me and my personality. I miss it though. I miss it though I look much better with help from Botox. I still am sad about my metamorphosis, but I am alive, vital, working, and fortunate that it is a condition that is not serious compared to other diseases. You were so beautiful, Sarah. That is such an incredible story. And again, I think speaks to this notion of what can the face do? And I think for actors, there's also a gender distinction between, I think men get to play more with like, what can my face do? You know, like thinking about Cosmo and Singing in the Rain. It's like
more agency.
Yeah, and women are supposed to be looked at and smile and, you know, be beautiful. And I'm so moved by that story that someone saw you in Julius Caesar and said, what an amazing thing your face could do, thinking about capacity and function rather than how you look. I met a woman at a book reading who had been an actress in LA and got Bell's palsy and just kind of gave up her acting career and moved to Rhode Island to write. And to me, there was a real tragedy thinking that our our arts world is not wide enough for people with asymmetries, even though the world is wide enough for that. It's absurd. Why should all of our avatars be symmetrical when we in the audience are not symmetrical? So thank you so much for sharing that and for continuing to act. That's amazing. There's also a question about what sort of art, books, music did you seek out as a refuge while you were recovering / suffering? I mean, one funny story is, I was sort of angry. So I got a book called On Anger, which is Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a wonderful Buddhist monk. But one of his meditation strategies was sort of saying, meditate, sit in meditation, now smile. And I just wanted to like chuck the book across the room because, he was saying your calm and your joy are created by your smile physically. So smile as you meditate. And I was like, I fucking can, I can. And then I met a monk later, a Tibetan monk, who said, you can always smile. I mean, I think I was so focused on what I couldn't do at the beginning that it was.
Can you just tell your questioner the point you made about feeling that your paralysis made you a stranger to yourself, and the point you made that you were so angry that the word stranger has anger in it, which I thought was mind-blowing. Wonderful idea.
I wonder at what point I noticed that I was looking at the word stranger and seeing that the word anger was in it and thinking about the concept of how anger itself can be sort of disfiguring. I mean, to use a word that like I'd rather was not in the dictionary in a way, but
sure. It can certainly distort you.
It's distorting anger.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you got a couple more there.
Right. As you work to become a medical expert on your own body, did you notice any pushback or dismissal from doctors? Yes, I did. Yeah, I did. I mean, the first neurologist I saw really, he felt so punitive to me. And he kind of was like, well, it's been 6 months. You're not better. You're not going to get any better. You have to have experimental neurosurgery. And those two words together, experimental neurosurgery, I was like, I don't want to see those two words together as it relates to my brain. Like, I'm just not interested in experimental neurosurgery. And he was wrong, because I did get better after that 6 months happened. And to the other questioner's point about how it's a chronic condition, not life-threatening, what was amazing about my story was that, not to go into too much medical detail, but I found a second neurologist who realized I had something called celiac disease, which is part of the reason I wasn't getting better. Was with celiac, you don't absorb your vitamins. So I wasn't getting any B12, which is it's like trophic factors that help your nerves regrow. So since I wasn't getting any, the nerves weren't growing back. And celiac disease can lead to cancer and other autoimmune conditions if you don't treat it. So what was amazing was Bell's palsy did have this little gift inside of it, like that fortune cookie I cracked open saying, deliver what is in you, it'll save your life. I mean, who knows? But my father died of cancer when he was in his early 50s. And we never knew he had celiac disease until we were reading his baby book. I think I was, doing a little research looking at his baby book, and it said Patrick Ruhl, pyloric spasms, celiac disease. And it was thought to be a pediatric disease at that time. So he never knew he had it. So, that was one strange, bizarre silver lining of this diagnosis, was that another one was inside it that might be, far more important, actually. Have you found some relief in healing working with doctors? I'm wondering if I should have a surgery recommended at my facial nerve clinic to give me a better smile. Risky in terms of the possibility of articulation issues. Most people close to me say no. I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know, but I found I can speak for myself, having seen a lot of specialists, that at this point I'll do anything that can't cause harm. I'll do acupuncture, I'll do physical therapy. I haven't tried medical Botox, but I would try it because I don't think there's any significant harm. But the surgeries do scare me. I think there's, with a certain experimental neurosurgery for this, there's a 60% positivity rate, not just 60%, not that you recover 60%, but 60% chance that it will work because it's a new surgery. So I'm no expert and I can't say, but I guess I like Hippocrates' old meme, do no harm. I've been trying to follow that. And I've been really impressed with how acupuncture and chiropractic and PT can help. And antivirals, even way after the fact. Seems like there are a lot of people with Bell's palsy who are in the chat. There's one more question. Now that you've had time to become used to it, would you want your face to return to its pre-palsy appearance, or is it now how you identify? It's funny, I was thinking about that the other day. Yeah, I'd take my old face, sure. Yeah, I'd take it. You know, maybe I've moved on spiritually, but if given my old plate on a platter with no downsides, yeah, I'd probably take it. That doesn't seem like the most evolved answer, but I was talking to Tina Howe, John, an old friend, and after she read the book, she was like, Sarah, I never thought you would think of your face at all. I didn't think you would have a trace of vanity. I'm shocked that you would have any vanity. And I said, well, Tina, I don't think it's vanity. I think it's a pretty low bar of thinking about your face in a certain way. But I do think it's, at the end of the day, we are embodied. We are known by our faces, even though the face is not the self. And I think writing the book helped me broaden my view of that. Yeah.
It doesn't, personality, doesn't the word personality have in it the idea of a face, persona?
Right.
So to some extent, I'm not sure. I mean, the face on some external level is who you are.
It's a big signifier. We're not known by our hands or feet. We're known by our faces. You know, there's facial recognition technology. In many ways, it sort of is our marker of our identity, which is, I think, you know, why this stuff is so tough.
Indeed.
John, what about you? Do you like looking at your face on Zoom? What about this?
Do I like my face on Zoom? I don't really think about it that much. Although I think I'm certainly aware of. I was raised in a family where we had to look good. Mm-hmm. Looking good was a very, very important, because we were always extensions of my dad. In that sense, we were told we had to look good because we were going to. If we didn't, it would be a reflection on them, mm-hmm. and they were public people, and mm-hmm. So I think I probably am more vain than I would like to admit. That's what I'm saying. Even as an oldie, mm-hmm. You know, I like to get dressed up. Mm-hmm. You know, walk around, refuse to be old. Mm-hmm.
We're out of questions from the audience, but do you have more? Do you have more stuff, John, you wanted to talk about?
Well, not a whole lot. I just thought the book was terrific, and I twice through it, and like everything, I find not just what it has to say, but how you say it always really enlightening and stimulating. That stays with me. So as your plays do. So I'm your number one fan, Sarah, I think.
Well, it's
and
just...
I hope you get. I know you have a new play coming on next year at Lincoln Center, mm-hmm. and I know it's about the Crucible of Arthur Miller. Mm-hmm. I think I know the thesis, and I think I have to. I think you're right about the genesis of the play. Mm-hmm. So I'm really looking forward to that. and any other stuff that I can look forward to? Oh, I see
Well,
we have another question there.
oh
Go ahead, if you
yeah.
wanna-
It's a sweet comment. Look how masks are impacting us all as far as not being able to see smiles or frowns. It's all in the eyes. I feel more equal now as most folks are covering their smiles. It's true. Yep, I agree. Do you find this experience has crept into your playwriting at all? Do you intend to write about it in that genre? You know, it's interesting. I felt like the story was really a book rather than a play because it felt so internal and so much the story of changing one's thoughts and feelings and slow incremental change. I mean, now that I've written the book, I kind of think, oh, you could probably adapt it into a play because theater is the language of metaphor. You probably could do it. But part of me thinks I poured it all into a book so that I don't have to write a play about it.
Yes.
And I think I wrote it for other people going through similar circumstances, whether it's a chronic illness or yeah.
But by the very nature of writing about it, you're sort of shedding shame being
Yes.
about hiding. And so you're in the open about this and
Yes.
living with it and saying,
Yes.
this is it, and this is where I've come, and I've moved on.
Yes, exactly. And do you know Jonathan Kalb, John?
Yes, I
So
met him.
yeah, so
Yeah, I met him at the theater
there's
audience,
this
for new audience.
he's a dramaturg and a critic, and also he had unrecovered Bell's palsy. And I he wrote a very moving essay in the New Yorker about it. And finally, while I was writing the book, I thought I'm going to contact Jonathan Kalb and sit down and talk to him. And he talked about Bell's in terms of sort of coming out, like he was like, finally, I'm making expression, even though I feel ugly doing it. And he talked about it as a kind of coming out as having Bell's palsy. And I think that language makes sense to me, that in terms of what you're saying about shedding shame. And I felt so, I mean, it seemed so ridiculous. It took me so long to have lunch with Jonathan, and it felt so helpful to just mirror his expressions and know what he'd been through and know it was similar, and that if we were both eating a soup dumpling, it might explode and we might not be able to eat it properly because of what was going on with us. And it really helped me. And he sent me his book after the lunch, and an inscription in the flyleaf, he said, methinks 'tis time again to smile, from Twelfth Night. And I think, in a way, writing the book was a way of saying that to myself.
Indeed, and that is a subtext that really came across very strongly to me. That's part of the internal drama of putting pen to paper, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I see we have a couple more there, by the way.
Yeah. Out of all your work, which is closest to your heart? I mean, they're all my little children, so it's hard to pick. Right now, the play that's living in my heart at the moment is Eurydice, because it's being made into an opera. John, I hope you can come somehow.
If I can go over, you don't know this, but right behind me on that mantelpiece is a tile from the set that you gave me. A tile. Right. It's right up there in my cherished possessions.
Oh, that's so nice.
Anyway, show everybody.
hearing the Sopranos sing it, I mean, it was just sort of it was a thrilling day, because we were in the basement of the Met, and and it's a play that I wrote when I was 26, and this young composer, Matthew O'Coin, was probably that age when he started scoring it, and I think his score is astonishing. So that's the play that's most in my mind. It opens November 23rd, but it's being broadcast through that Met HD thing, so maybe it will be in London. I know they show it in different movie theaters.
Great.
What has surprised you in the feedback readers have provided to Smile? It is always vulnerable when such a personal piece is released. It is vulnerable. I think I know you, Margaret Hall. It is vulnerable. And what surprised me, I mean, people's stories I find so moving. I mean, there was one story of a woman who came to a reading and said she'd been overweight as a child, and she felt like because she was overweight, when people would give her a compliment, they'd say, "You have such a beautiful smile." And so she always thought her smile was her beauty. And then she lost a bunch of weight, and then she got Bell's palsy as a grown up and felt like her smile was taken from her. And there was another man in the audience who said his dad came back from World War II with Bell's palsy. And he said, and my dad never talked about World War II, and he never talked about Bell's palsy. No one talked about how he had a changed face. So partly I feel like just allowing people to speak of it. I mean, again, John, when you talk about your identity as your face, I think as a result, people find it very impolite and taboo to even talk about it. For example, so my husband's stepmother, I always knew she had some congenital issue with her face, but I actually didn't know what it was because I didn't ask her. It seemed rude to ask. And after the book came out, she said, "I'm so glad you wrote about Bell's palsy because, of course, I have Bell's palsy too." This is my husband's stepmother. We never talked about it until I wrote a book about it. And I said, "How did you get it?" And she said, she's Thai. And she said, as a baby in Thailand, she had a tumor, and they did experimental jaw surgery to remove this tumor. And they cut the cranial nerve by accident. And the doctors never taught her how to do rehab for it. So hers is pretty extreme because the nerve was completely severed. So I guess in answer to your question, what's moved me is people telling their stories and not feeling a sense of shame or taboo about it. And maybe that's a good place to end. Does that seem right, John?
Fine by me. Lovely talking to you.
Me too.
This has been such an amazing talk. Sarah, I'm a big fan. It's been wonderful to have you. John, thank you so much for joining us. Any final words from either of you?
Oh, just thank you. And it's nice to, speaking of faces, it's nice to see your face, John, and projected through the ether over the Atlantic. And thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah,
and thanks for hosting.
Hope to see you around the dinner table, not in the not too distant future.
Yeah. Likewise.
Absolutely. Thank you, John, for staying up late. And
yeah, really.
Thank you to everyone who's tuning in from home. Thank you for all your very thoughtful questions. And thank you, of course, for showing up for authors, publishers, and indie book selling, and all the incredible staff at Harvard Bookstore. We appreciate it so much that you take the time to be here. Check out the links in the chat if you would like to purchase a copy of Smile. It's fantastic. You absolutely should check it out. Please remember to shop indie and shop local, and holidays are coming up. Shop early. From all of us at Harvard Bookstore, have a great rest of your night. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.